This lesson is going to have a look at question 3 on Language Paper 2, Section A. I've isolated this one because it's getting into the more important questions now, the higher marked questions. So this is a 12 marker. You want to be really confident on this one and spend a bit of time understanding it, practicing it, and getting really good at understanding what they're going to mark and how they mark you as well. So this lesson is going to help you do all of that, basically. So the first thing we're going to look at is, what do you do? There's a language analysis question. It's wanting you to analyze in detail. Analyzing means talking about how and why the language is working in different ways. Even though you're analyzing language, there might be a different focus and purpose going on. So make sure, as with all exam questions in any subject at any level, make sure to underline the focus and circle it, and make sure you always look back at it when you're writing so that you don't forget what the question is about. The easiest way to drop marks is to just stop talking about the question, because the whole time you're off topic, you can't pick up any marks for that. So in this case, it's going to be describe, persuade, influence, and so on. Persuade and influence are actually the same purpose, even though the words are different. They're both persuasive ways of writing. So you want to make sure that you're aware of the purpose that is being identified, and all of your ideas when you analyze the language are going to go back into that same purpose. So you're looking for detailed, specific effects. If you can do language analysis, but your answers always come back at a mid-level grade, which is still good, what it means is probably that you've got the whole shape of the answer right, you've understood the question, but you're not going beyond the basics of analysis. So the way to get a really high level, use a range of language techniques instead of just repeating the same ones, and go more detailed and specific with what you're trying to say. So in this case, I try and aim for maybe 2 to 3 lines of analysis per quotation. Something like that is a good rule of thumb to start out with. Once you're confident being detailed, you can analyze however much or however little you want on a specific point, as long as you do detail somewhere in the question. But for a learning sort of format, you may as well try and be detailed on every single point that you write. So you absolutely need to use PEE paragraph structures, really important. So make sure that you know how to use those, what they are, how to do them. I talk about them a lot in a lot of lessons. So if you've done scribbly lessons for a while, that should be something that I've drummed into your brain by now. It's basically point, evidence, explanation. So we'll be looking at that a little bit more in detail later in this lesson anyway. I always aim for 3 medium-sized paragraphs because it's a 12 marker. Usually on an 8 marker, you write about 2 to 3. So for this one, you want to write 3 to 4 paragraphs. It's not how many paragraphs you write, it's how well they're written. So the quality is more important than the number of words that you write, or the length of your paragraph, or the number of paragraphs. Every paragraph is a different topic, not a different quotation. So you're not just looking at, here's a quote, analyze it for a paragraph, move on. You're also not looking at a different technique necessarily per paragraph. Sometimes people structure this question in terms of, firstly, the writer uses metaphor. Secondly, the writer uses imagery. If you do that, it really limits you for what you can say in the paragraph. So I try personally to not do it that way around if I can help it, because your language analysis will be more basic if you're only looking at one technique in that entire paragraph. If you have a more general topic that you're exploring, you can then use several quotations per paragraph, and you can also use several techniques that are different there. So it gives you a much broader range across the whole answer if you're not just structuring it technique by technique. This last point, I put it in because I did this wrong once and it drove me crazy. So make sure to look at the section of the text that is stated in the question. Don't use the whole text. It will tell you where to look. Usually it gives it you in a box, so that's fine. But make sure if it says look at lines whatever to whatever, you don't look outside of that. As soon as you do that, you'll start dropping marks. So here are some example questions. If you have time, I want you to pause this lesson and spend time thinking of what are the keywords in each question, what is the focus of each question, particularly what is the purpose that they're looking for and the specific idea, the main idea that the question is asking you to answer. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Feel free to pause as long as you need. Don't spend more than 5 minutes or so because it's only a kind of quick little task to do. When you're ready, we'll come back and carry on. So just in case you completed that task and you're feeling a bit confused, personally, I do things like, source A is an important keyword because you're not looking at the second text, just the first. Definitely the lines, like I say. In this case, how does the writer use language is important. Describe is your purpose, so that's description. His son is the focus. So you're not just looking generally at the descriptive language, you're looking specifically at the son and thinking, how is all of the techniques that he uses and the way that he writes about his son creating a specific type of person in our minds? So it's a kind of characterization question in that way, and some of them are characterization questions. The second one is similar, describe Sister Brendan. So again, characterization of this character. Describe as in description. This one is tricky because it's two texts in the source B and they only want you to look at the letter by Henry. So when I actually practice this full paper with a lot of my students, they just forget this and try and look at both letters. So make sure that you don't get led astray and you always look at exactly where it tells you to look. How does Henry use language to influence his father? So influence is persuasive. Father is the person that he's persuading. So everything that you write about needs to be on a topic to do with this focus of the question. Describe his son. I would look at 3 different ways the son is described. Describe Sister Brendan. I would look at 3 different ways that she's described. Influence his father is a bit different. I would look at 3 different ways that Henry is trying to persuade the father. So each paragraph becomes a different topic, and within that you analyze lots of techniques. I know I've said that quite a few times, but I have this habit in my teaching where if there's a really key idea, I'll just keep saying it to you and hope it goes in. So yeah, that's one of my key ideas for this lesson. Don't do it technique by technique, come up with ideas and then do multiple techniques in each paragraph underneath the topic sentence of the idea that you've outlined. So this is a summary of how to answer the question. Feel free to pause and look through this in detail. It just gives you really precise advice about how to do it. The only one I'm going to really super pick up on is this one. Don't ever say it makes the reader want to read on. Examiners hate it. Don't say it catches the reader's attention, it engages the reader. These can just apply to any piece of writing at any point by anyone for any purpose in history, not even in English, but in the history of writing. They're far too general to give you anything. All they do is waste time while you're writing them. So you need precise ideas. You need exactly what is that language doing in that moment for the purpose that the writer intended. Be sharp with your analysis, be clear and detailed with your understanding of the effects. If you're general in your effects, you will drop a lot of marks and you'll probably end up around a mid-grade at best, maybe even lower. So it's super important. A lot of people, when they can't do this question and they struggle with it, come to me and they don't know what they're doing wrong, and that is usually what they're doing wrong. So if you're doing that, you're not alone. It's a really normal thing. I think I used to do it as well at school because you don't always get told not to. But I'm telling you now, so now you know, you have no excuse. Especially catches attention, engages reader wants to read on. avoid those like the plague. So the top band, this is what they're looking for. Detailed, meaning you're thorough, you're precise. You don't just say something and move on quickly. You think really thoughtfully and sensitively about exactly what's going on there. Perceptive, you notice things that maybe other people don't notice. Judicious, which before I was an examiner, I didn't know what this word meant. I'd never seen it in my life, but it means that you select the right information for your question and your task. So you select a good range of evidence, of quotations, but you don't only select a range of them, you select precise ones that really illuminate the analysis. Your terminology has to be really, I was going to say on point, it's a bit too, you know what I mean by on point. It has to be really precise and really great and amazing for this question. So not just accurate, but sophisticated. Maybe choose weirder techniques that a normal person would avoid. Instead of metaphor, try and look for an extended metaphor. Instead of just saying imagery, say what type of imagery. Is it visual, olfactory, auditory? If you're not sure about these things, one good thing to do with this question is just make a huge list of poetic devices and rhetorical devices and learn them and make sure that you're confident on that. If you do that, it will massively help you with the writing section of this paper as well. So I always, pretty much every student that I teach this to, I force them to make a list of poetic devices and learn them, and then a list of rhetorical and learn them. If you're really stuck, we actually have courses on that as well. So you can look on the Scribbly course page for things like basic language devices, I think is a good course that goes through terminology there. So I've broken down those terms a bit more here. You might want to pause and look through them if you're not confident on what those words mean. Examiners use them a lot in both language and literature. So if you get used to them, you know what they mean, you're confident, that's going to translate to better grades and better work overall. The indicative standard is an example of what they're looking for. So I'm going to actually ignore it at this point, but again, pause, read through that, maybe read it aloud so you get an idea of what they're looking for. So it's the type of writing that you'd expect to see in a really high-level answer. So we have example answers. These are from a range of different question 3s on different papers. This one actually is one of my own papers that I invented for this question, because I found that there's not really that many example papers, and if you do a few of them like I have, either it gets boring and you just keep repeating them, or you make your own. So I started to make my own, and you'll notice some of my own papers kind of mixed in with the official AQA ones on this course. So this is an answer that a student did for me on one of my own papers. And he's just starting out with an analytical writing. So he's actually doing really well, getting a grade 5 or a level 5, a C grade for his the standard that he's at. So you can read through that and think about, why does it achieve a really good solid level 5 grade, which translates as a high C these days as well. So level 4 is a low C grade. If you're aiming for a pass, a 4 is a pass. So this is actually above what you'd expect for a pass grade. So you can read this and you can kind of think about, why is it really good, but also how can it be improved? You might notice things like it just starts with a technique every time, like I said, not to do. You might notice that it actually has some really sensitive, thoughtful, detailed opinions in there that show evidence of a higher level, but the grammar maybe lets it down a little bit, because the grammar is really important in these questions. So sometimes students actually show things that would be worthy of an A, but some of the other things they do aren't in place for them to get that A grade. Bear that in mind if you're aiming for higher than you're already getting on your papers. You want to make sure that your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation, your expression, your academic style, all of that has to be in place. If you have great ideas and you don't have that, you can't get beyond around a C grade. So you can contrast that with this student that did an A grade answer. I don't know if this was one of my papers, I can't remember, because there's one official paper on Isabel Bird and then one that I made. So who knows? I think it's actually the official paper, this one, because it's to do with the sea. So this would be a level 7 grade, which is a really great level. It translates to an A grade. It's not a perfect level. So as you look through this, you can think about why is it a higher grade than the one before, but also what's not so good about it? How can it be better? Because it's not perfect yet. And the full mark answer, the A star level 9 grade, sorry, my dog. Today I'm filming a load of paper 2 language lessons, and if you're watching them, you'll notice in almost all of them my dog is a pain, so just expect him in the background to do something disruptive at some point. So this one, the perfect answer, I'm going to just read you a paragraph from it and we'll have a look at why it's really, really good. Firstly, Henry's letter is highly persuasive as it uses emotive language to make the father pity him in his situation. The use of first person I establishes a personal feeling in the letter, giving a sense of Henry's own character, whereas the collective pronoun we creates a persuasive impression of the deep connection between Henry and his father, although we realize that it is nearly 2 years since they have seen each other. Furthermore, Henry states that he's very unhappy to have not received a letter from the master. The adjective unhappy deliberately incites the emotions of pity and sadness early on, emphasizing the sense that Henry's lonely and unable to communicate properly with the outside world, which is the reason for his need to write a sly letter. So it has very confident quotations, some of these very short single word quotations, I, we, master. It has very precise ideas that are perceptive. They notice details. So it's not just Henry talking to his father, but actually it's 2 years since they really saw each other in person. So on the one hand, they have a strong, deep connection, but on the other hand, he's not really seen his father in 2 years. So there's a lot of kind of tension there or emotion going on. It ends on a quotation, which is not always the best thing to do. But if you have enough quotations that you've analyzed well in the rest of the paragraph, then you can afford to end on a quotation like that. So only do that if you're very confident with your essay writing. And it starts with the topic sentence. It does actually use a technique here, but emotive language is a very large term and lots of different things can come underneath that. So it doesn't matter because it can explore a range of techniques underneath the umbrella term, emotive language. So the point is that the letter is really persuasive because it's so emotional, and then it goes into techniques about why it's emotional. So first person, and then collective pronoun we, and then we have this idea of the adjective. So there's a range of grammatical language devices being used there. So I want you to, if you have time, read through this full mark answer and spend time mining it for ideas. It doesn't matter that if you've not done this paper or read the text, because you shouldn't really be thinking about what you would say yourself on the matter. You want to read objectively and think about what makes this an answer that examiners are looking for. So what is good about it? And you might want to bullet point things that you think it does well. Even perfect answers, full mark answers, they don't have to have everything perfectly correct about them. So you might have a look at some things that it could do better as well. You don't have to assume that it's completely without fault. So hopefully you found this really useful, and if you have time, definitely download the document from the Scribbly page, look through these example answers in detail, try and look at an answer that you wrote for this question if you have one, and see where you would put it. Would you put it at or above that level 5 grade, at or above that level 7, or at that level 9, and why? See if you can figure out the style that you're using versus the style of these 3 examples I gave you here. So yeah, hopefully you feel like you know what this paper's about, you okay with questions 1 to 3, and you're feeling really confident and ready to have a go at a paper soon. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in a future lesson.